relationship between women and men is apparently at a historic low. Fewer people than ever before in history. Apparently, both women and men are dating, are in relationship, are having sex, and are getting married. A YouTuber, I believe he's a psychologist I follow, Dr. Orion Taraban, says that most men and women don't want a real relationship, but only what a relationship can give them. It is commonly said in this culture that women trade sex for resources and men trade resources for sex. This is true only in a dominator model society where men control most of the daily resources and women are forced to barter with men for these resources, with the primary asset that they own, that men want, heterosexual sex with their female bodies. I often disagree with Dr. Taraban, but his videos are well done. They are blessedly succinct and brief, with intelligent and thought-provoking ideas. And he likens this issue to a job. Most people get most jobs not for the job itself, but for what the job can give them. And Dr. Taraban says, relationships are the medium in which value is transacted. If you already possessed the value, or if you could obtain it more easily, more cheaply, or more safely elsewhere, then there is no need to enter into the transaction. He's saying that relationships are a transaction between two parties. And this applies to both most jobs for most people and also to most relationships. But here's the important point. Only in a patriarchy is this so. Only dominator model cultures see relationships as transactional. But since that's the culture that we're living in, let's take a look at how it works. If you have a job just because you need money and you suddenly inherited a fortune, you'd probably quit that job. If you're a man and you enter into a relationship trading your resources, which for men is time, energy, attention, and money, trading those things, your resources, for sexual opportunity with a woman, and you found that you could get that sexual opportunity more easily, more cheaply, and with less aggravation elsewhere, barring any other compelling reason for the relationship, you probably wouldn't enter into that relationship. Why would you? If you're a woman and you enter into a relationship on the basis of trading your sexual services for resources, and if you found that you could get those desired resources elsewhere more easily, more safely, more cheaply, for example, if you were able to acquire those resources in the same way men do, i.e. working for a living, then again, barring any other compelling reason, you may not bother with particularly a mediocre relationship. Dr. Taraban points out that if both women and men could safely, cheaply, and easily get what they wanted elsewhere, besides within the context of a relationship, then we would see the number of relationships decline. And in fact, that is exactly what's happening. He believes there are two major culprits, porn and social media. Typically, young men have problems with porn and young women have problems with social media. Young men form relationships to trade resources for sexual opportunity. If they could get sex without having to give over their resources, they would prefer that. Of course, as Taraban rightly points out, masturbating to porn is not the same as having sex with a living woman, but apparently for a huge percentage of men, it is good enough to impel them into daily porn consumption, even at the cost of their current primary relationship with a real woman. Addiction to porn has already destroyed many sexual relationships and ruined many marriages. Dr. Taraban does not explain why this would be so, why an image of a woman on a screen would be compared to a real woman in real life, why that would be good enough for a man. I'm sorry to say that the answer to this is very unpleasant and even shocking to most women. Why is porn a good enough substitute for a living woman for so many men? Here's a horrible insight into the mind of the average man, and 80% of men are average. Here's a horrible insight into the mind of the average man in our dominator model culture. With misogyny and woman abuse baked in, most young men are conditioned from a young age to, and this is not their fault, this is how society conditions young men. They are conditioned from a young age to not see women as fully human. When the average man is having sex with a woman, in their minds, this is not all men, yes, I know, not all men, but the average man, when he is having sex with a woman, in his mind, she really is more of an object for gratification than anything else. She is a receptacle. She is a series of holes for their sexual gratification, which is why porn works equally well to having sex with a live woman for so many men. Now, you women may imagine that men think sex is so much better with a live woman than masturbating to an image on a screen. But I am sorry to tell you, women, that is not how most average men look at it at all. And the proof is in the pudding. Men are in droves turning to porn when they have a living woman right there in the next room, but they're on their computer screens, destroying their relationship with a living woman as they focus on the screen, what's on the screen. That's what's happening. That's what women are telling me, that porn is destroying their marriage, destroying their intimacy. So that proves that in the mind of the average man, sex with you is not all that much better than sex with an image on a screen. What the average man is doing with you when they have sex with you is essentially the same as what they do on a screen. In their minds, they are masturbating to your image in front of them. I know, not all men, but a lot. When they're having sex with you, in your mind, they think they are appreciating you, thinking of you as unique and wonderful, and having sex with unique you who they love, seeing you as a full, complete human being. No, 80% of men, particularly young men who are inexperienced in relationship, when they are having sex with you, they are not seeing you as a complex human being with whom they are maybe in love or at least in like. They're not seeing you as someone, a real person who they respect and admire and want to have sex with. That's not what's happening in their minds at that moment. This is why porn is so ubiquitous now. Yes, I know that many men talk a good story about wanting to please you and wanting to pleasure you in your own special way. They're interested in your uniqueness. But think about it. That is mostly in the beginning when they're trying to get you into bed to have sex with them. Think about your own relationships of the past. Remember how that attitude fell away dramatically over time, didn't it? Particularly after marriage. For the average male, seeing a beautiful woman on the screen and masturbating to that image is almost the same as having sex with real you in front of them. And consider the very numerous and appealing benefits of a screen woman compared to a real woman. The woman on the screen doesn't have complicated needs and desires of her own. She never rejects you. She's never in a bad mood. She always looks good. She always looks ready to have sex with you, even at 2 a.m., because she doesn't need sleep. She never asks you to do tiresome things like take out the rubbish or repair a leaky faucet or change the oil in her car. She doesn't ever have a honey-do list. She doesn't get sick. Her body doesn't change over the years. She doesn't grow old, which, by the way, always painfully reminds men of how they are growing old too. That's one of the many reasons why men despise older women. It reminds them of their own impending death. Moonstruck pointed that out. Mm-hmm. Her attention is not ever on something other than you, like her children maybe. And she never leaves you, at least as long as you continue to have money for your phone and internet. And one last thing, she's always new looking, and men are geared to want to have novelty. And there's always novelty in the screen appearance of a woman, because with a tap of his key, a man can have a new and different woman in front of him every minute to masturbate to. Men's porn has really evolved. If you're not up on this, women, get a clue. Today's porn showing women on a screen is light years away from Playboy magazine 50 years ago. And men, here's how old I am. Men no longer have to suffer the indignity or embarrassment of getting caught at an adult store getting videos. Those days are gone. This ease of access to porn and the astonishing rate at which men are consuming it proves that how the average man feels about you, a real woman, and how they feel about some anonymous random woman on a screen, basically the same. You and the screen woman are fungible. You're not special for the same reason the woman on the screen is not special. Neither of you is seen as human. As robot dolls become more and more lifelike and the cost goes down, as the cost of every computer type machine eventually comes down, more and more of the type of men who are turning to screens now will be turning to the robot dolls in the very near future, which will just further blur the line between what a real woman is and what is not. Dr. Taraban's videos are, as I said, blessedly short and succinct. So he probably has, due to time constraints, left out many of his other insights on this topic. I'm sure he has much more to say on this that would make sense. But what should be mentioned here is that sexual opportunity is not the only important reason men enter into relationships with women. There's another very important transaction men expect from women. In our culture, woman is the creator of children and the worker bee, taking care of those children after she has brought them into being. If a man wants to carry on his family line, which many men in that dominator mindset still are very much concerned with, he still needs a woman to produce children for him. That will change if men can figure out how to grow babies in bags in labs, which they're already trying to do right now. If they succeed, and they will, be assured they will, men will be able to produce heirs without the complications, the needs, the claims, and the inconveniences of a walking, talking mother who thinks that she might have some rights. But we're at the early technological stage where men still need women to produce babies. Men are still interested in having heirs and a family line. And after a woman provides him with an heir, he still needs some woman to take care of those babies. So it might as well be the mother, since she's already attached to the kids that she made for you. men of science continue with their mad, heartless, life-denying technological advances. I know, not all men, not all men. These men will be able to have good-looking robot women to take care of babies once these babies have been birthed from their plastic lab bags. The erasure of woman will then be complete. But we have an ace, and pardon the pun, we have an ace in the hole. More on that in a moment. The sad fact that we women must accept right now in this current reality, and it can change, but what's happening right now, most men do not want a relationship with a woman because they don't see us yet as fully human. For men, women are in this worldwide patriarchal, misogynist, male-centric culture, as he points out, a means to an end. And to be fair, he believes that women see men as a means to an end also. So he's fair in that way. So what about women? Do they see men as a means to an end? Taraban says that social media allows women to exchange sexual opportunity for resources. He says when a woman posts sexualized content on Instagram or OnlyFans, she's using technology to leverage her sexual opportunity through imagery reproduction at zero cost to her. In other words, her one body shown on a screen for one discrete period of time can make money repeatedly from potentially countless men viewing that one video rather than her providing exhausting ongoing sexual services in real life to just one man. And this view is not entirely incorrect. Technically, this is true, but it's based on a wrong assumption about women, that in viewing men, we women are like men. And that is simply not the case. It is well proved in our culture that women are more interested in people and men are more interested in things. And of course, that's certainly not necessarily true of all men as human beings. Ancient matriarchal structures prove that. But in our culture, men are socialized to care more about things than people, leaving relationship to the women in their lives. Another reason why porn is so perfectly satisfying to many men. She is a thing on their screen. You as a woman show up in real life and, well, you're still a thing on the screen of his mind. And by the way, if you don't think that women are in charge of relationship, just ask yourself who in your family sends the birthday cards and who writes the thank you notes. Yeah, that person probably has a vagina. But back to women. I propose that most women do not want to sell themselves online or anywhere else as sexual beings. Some women feel forced to because, unlike for men, this is one of the very lucrative, potentially lucrative avenues open to women in this broken culture. I worked very hard for many years as a secretary when I was young in the corporate world, and I trained many men who were promoted past me after I trained them to do the job. I trained them and they were promoted over me, making more money, especially over the course of their lifetimes. We were both equally talented, competent, intelligent, motivated, but they were promoted over me because they were men. It is much easier for men to make money than women at conventional jobs. Now, some of this has changed, but maybe not so much as you might think. I have a close woman friend who was a call girl in Las Vegas for many years. She said she started because she knew she couldn't possibly make as much money being a secretary or a waitress. And as an aside, a few years ago, as a personal project, I interviewed dozens of prostitutes in Las Vegas, and every single one of them was sexually assaulted before the age of 15, usually by a family member. And that I maintain, is what contributed to their idea of themselves as sex is all they were good for. My friend pointed out that she could go to work at McDonald's, making hamburgers, slaving away in terrible conditions for minimum wage, or she could make $1,000 cash tax-free in 2 hours. 2 hours of very risky work, yes. Her career as a call girl dramatically ended the night she came to her senses. She was called to a Las Vegas hotel room and was expected to have sex with 3 guys at one time, all the same time. And I do mean at one time, not one after the other, but all at the same time. Three men. One of them then demanded so-called breath play, which is a thing, and he wanted to enact a realistic scenario of choke her till she dies. This is what porn sick men are doing these days. If you're not up on this, if you knew the number of nameless women whose bodies are lying out in the desert, but not reported by the press or followed up on by the police because it's bad for tourism, you would be shocked. Women might appear to choose to put together an OnlyFans account, but what underlies that motivation is that she's been conditioned for years in this culture to think that that is all she is good for. Women with self-esteem do not have OnlyFans accounts like that. Women might appear to choose to become a prostitute, but she's been conditioned too by our culture that uses women constantly everywhere as sex objects. And for the woman needing to make some real money when she's not trained for anything else that's lucrative, that's one of the few potentially real money-making avenues open to a female if her pimp doesn't take most of it. Emotionally healthy women don't want their daily work to be bodily penetration by a series of strange, sometimes brutal, sometimes psychotic, sometimes dangerous men. Men have a fantasy of the so-called sex worker woman as some fun-loving gal who just loves sex, and that's how they make it okay in their minds. If men only knew what prostituted women really think of them. So it's much more complicated than simply men trade resources for sex and women trade sex for resources. Much more complicated. Tara Ben makes the point that, like online porn is not the same as sex with a real woman, social media is not the same as real connection and relationships with real people, but it's apparently enough like it to trap a lot of women. And this is, I would disagree with that. This is not a complete picture of what's really happening. Women are not obsessed with social media because they're getting some kind of resources from it, the way men are getting sex from porn and OnlyFans. Women are obsessed with social media because we women, compared to men in this culture, are the ones most interested in relationship, most interested in truly connecting with people, in knowing what people think, knowing how people feel. And social media is a quick and easy way to gauge how people feel about you, to assess your social acceptability and your overall worth to others. And women are obsessed with what they are worth in this culture. And there's a very sane reason why this is so, because if you as a woman are worth nothing in a male-centric culture, you run the very real risk of being a throwaway. For women, assessing their worth is utterly critical to their very survival in this culture. Women have very little inherent worth as human beings in this culture. So if you as a woman, if you are worth nothing to a man, or worth nothing to men as a group, you can easily become homeless, disappeared, raped, thrown in the desert. Nobody cares. And we women know that. That's why most of us are so concerned with our looks, our class status. Check out how many videos on YouTube there are with the title something like, "Look expensive on a budget." Just zillions of them. Why would that be so important? because class in this culture is one way we establish our worth. And if we're poor, it behooves us to make every attempt to look like we belong to a higher class in this classist society. So young women, particularly, not so much older women, we've figured a few things out, but younger women are obsessed with their unspoken social credit score. They're obsessed with how many likes and hearts they get on Facebook and Instagram, because for women, how much those people either approve or disapprove of you can mean the difference between living in a mansion and feeling secure or living in a pay by the week motel that you know you'll get chucked out of next week if your disability check doesn't come in or if you get fired. It's literally life and death for women. Just ask any homeless woman. Ask what happened to her after nobody cared, after she was worth nothing to anyone. A young woman posts a sexy or even just pretty picture, and then she checks in an hour to see how many likes she has gotten so far. This is why so many young women are obsessed with social media, because it's a fast, although false, way of gauging how you are doing in society. And of course, your 1,000 friends on your page are not really friends at all, but in a society that is increasingly disconnected from Mother Nature and from each other as human beings, it's something. And, by the time you're my age, people's opinions turn out to be far less important. Young women will do better when they put their phones down and concentrate on doing the sometimes hard work of developing real relationships, a real supportive circle with other women, with men friends, with coworkers, with parents and children, instead of getting their social needs met on screen, which isn't really getting them met at all. As we are now finding out now with the skyrocketing rates of both young men and women saying how lonely they feel. Most women are having less sex, dating less, having fewer relationships, and getting married less often for some very simple reasons. Number one, they're having less sex because now porn-addicted men are demanding that women engage in repellent, dehumanizing, and dangerous sex, the same kind of sex these men see every day on their screen in gonzo porn, which is getting more and more brutal all the time. It's getting more brutal because the human brain tends to adjust and then require more novelty to achieve the same level of excitement. Where will this end? I guarantee you, with women being murdered during sex. And it's already happening. Google breath play and choking. Actually don't. Number two, women are dating less because dating, which is essentially spending time with a stranger, a male you know little to nothing about, is for women a very risky business, because men are statistically more violent as a group than women. It's not risky in the same way for men. For men, the risk is in being rejected. For women, it's the risk of being raped or killed. Countless women have gone on dates with men they don't know, only to be pressured into sex or even just flat out assaulted. It doesn't happen to every woman on every date, of course, not all men, but every woman knows more than one woman to whom this has happened. So we women see dating as a real risk. Each person's time is valuable. Dating is a very time-consuming process. Neither women nor men want to spend an evening with someone they can judge in 30 seconds. It's not going to work for them. And I guess that's probably how speed dating came into being. What was it back in the 80s? Speed dating, probably the most dehumanizing and pressure-filled event for both men and women, I would think. I guess speed dating is over. Now we just swipe right or left. Number three, women are having fewer relationships and getting married less because many of us have found tremendous freedom in living alone. Some of the gifts of our foremothers working for women's liberation have resulted in many of us finding ways to make our own living. We're no longer dependent upon a husband while we take care of the house. Many of us, particularly those of us who have no children, are no longer dependent upon men at all for resources. Many of us have been able to get our own resources. Women often complain that men in marriage start treating them like mothers, expecting them to pick up their socks, do their laundry, cook their meals, provide sex on demand. If we don't need the resources that men provide, if we are gathering these resources on our own, well, why should women do these things for men? Some men complain that women don't need us anymore. Well, I have some hard words for you. Make yourself valuable to us then. There are ways. Dr. Taraban says that people are increasingly replacing relationships with simulated relationships and inhabiting roles online that mirror their roles in the real life sexual marketplace. And his word marketplace is very apt, because in a patriarchy, that's what all life is, a big marketplace where people are forced to sell each other what they have, instead of being able to enjoy real relationships without strings. A real relationship is never transactional. In matriarchies, which almost nobody, including Dr. Taraban, seem to know very much about, life is not seen as a marketplace with everything for sale. Mother Nature is not a set of resources to be extracted, but rather a great mother to be revered and appreciated. And relationships are not transactional, but sacred engagements of equal persons, valuing each other's beinghood, men and women valuing each other as people. In a matriarchy, as with the ancient Mosuo of Tibet and the few other matriarchies around the world still hanging on by a thread, the core of society is not men holding the resources and then doling them out to women in exchange for sex or motherhood. The core of society is the family, led by a wise and just matriarch, a family where everyone is valued equally, boys and girls, women and men. In these societies, you don't see women using sex to lure men into giving them resources, because they don't have to. They already have the resources provided to them by the family. What you see is a beautiful arrangement where men and women are equal, where the resources are not held by one sex, but rather gathered, created, and shared by all fairly, where women and men can freely form loving, romantic, sexual alliances, but where the woman is not dependent upon the man for resources in exchange. These are cultures where women's sexuality is not a barter item, but free, truly free, for all to engage in as they will, and not tied to money or resources or pressure or control. These are societies where women are not dependent upon one man for resources, and men are not dependent upon one woman for sex. Some say that these matriarchies are a myth. I think this is true because we've been living in this system for so many thousands of years that we really can't imagine that things could be any different. It's like the fish saying, "What water?" There are books claiming that there have never been matriarchies. But for those people, I would refer them to the work of the brilliant Heidi Gettner Abendroth and suggest that they read at least one of her books, Societies of Peace, for the documentation of these cultures, some of which, like the Mosuo, still exist today. In a discussion of relationship between women and men, one thing is never mentioned: Shakti. Women provide Shakti, life force. Men know this, and that's why they literally plug into us for Shakti. That's why men rape women. They are starving for Shakti, and they are trying to get some by force. Men have Shakti too, of course, because they're alive, but women have the chalice for holding Shakti, the womb, which men do not. That's why men need women so badly, for the Shakti in our chalice, and they will take it by force if we don't give it to them willingly. As a culture, as our technology advances, we will doubtless go through our phase of millions of men having masturbatory sex with very lifelike robot dolls. Yeah, certainly that is where we're headed. They are disturbingly now even making child robot dolls for pedopredator men. But no matter how sophisticated and advanced the technology is, a robot doll remains a lifeless collection of rubber, plastic, and wires, and will never have any Shakti to give. And that's why after the novelty of the robot doll wears off, men will find them ultimately completely unsatisfying because there is no Shakti there. Without the supply of female Shakti, men will become very angry, but they will not know why. They will feel desperate as if they are starving somehow, but not for food. And in this interim, they will have practiced their various forms of abuses on rubber dolls. And in practicing, they will get very good at it. Then in their frustration and their fury, in their Shakti starvation, they will turn that well-practiced abuse on real women because there will be nobody else. And goddess help us then. To end rape, women should teach men how to access Shakti on their own. It can be learned, but you have to give up your dominance and your will to power. I'm sure Dr. Taraban has some thoughtful responses. I encourage you to go to his channel and subscribe and follow him. Some of his things will enrage you. Some will make you think. I don't like a lot of what he says. I do often disagree with him, but he does explain very well the patriarchal mindset and what is going on in this culture from a dominator model point of view. He sees that very clearly. I've learned a lot from him. He's a smart man. What he doesn't yet do, and what I hope he considers doing for future videos, is to compare this dominator model culture, which he knows very well, to what is possible, to other forms of relationship created by other types of cultures, such as matriarchies. Not some fantasy future that we're thinking of, but actual cultures that have existed and still exist today. How do they handle relationship with men and women? So much better. Women, we must never see men as the enemy, no matter how much we may despise their violence, their porn use, and whatever else you complain about for men. They are our sons. We have birthed every male on this planet. And in the end, we believe that there is one consciousness. And men, of course, are part of the one there is only one of. If your little finger was severely injured, causing you great pain, and then it started to become gangrenous, you would not hate your little finger. You wouldn't complain about it. You wouldn't despise it. You wouldn't castigate it. No, you would try to heal it. Men are the same. There is one body we call humanity, and a portion of that body is now sick. Women who hate men and men who hate women. It is sick, it is broken, it is infected with hate, it's infected with the idea of separation, the willingness to abuse on the part of men, the willingness to oppress women on the part of men, and the willingness to use others as resources, which men do and women are learning to do, unfortunately. We women must not hate men. We must hold a boundary. Untreated, gangrene spreads rapidly, and a small cut, small injury on your little finger can end up killing you if gangrene sets in. If your gangrenous finger was about to threaten your entire body and your life, you might amputate it to save yourself. With men who are abusing women and children, our amputation must take the form not of entirely separating ourselves from them. There's this idea of separation. We must separate from men. I don't think that's going to work. Men exist and we keep birthing them. And unless we're prepared to kill every male child that we birth, these are our children. They are our beloved sons. We have to live with men. They are our fathers They are our brothers. They are our coworkers. We have to live in the world with men. So separation is not the answer. So when I say amputate, I'm talking about a form of healthy and compassionate boundary that we must place on men in our lives, the actual men we interact with. And most women don't know how to do that. And that's part of what we teach here. So no, the way it is now is not just the way it is for humanity or just the way it has to be. There are so many good men making YouTubes, thoughtfully exploring human potential. And I think Dr. Taraban is one of them. So we look forward to these men, these thoughtful men, exploring a comparison between this patriarchal culture, which has only been around for 5,000 or 6,000 years or so, and the many matriarchal cultures that have existed, a few of which still exist, for thousands of years before patriarchy arose. So with respect and love and good heart, we women put forth this challenge to the good men. Let's see some YouTubes comparing cultures. See you next time. Blessed be.